Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. My fingernails were torn and bloody, but I kept digging. 6 months of work had brought us this far, too far to stop now. The darkness of our tunnel was absolute, broken only by the weak beam of a contraband flashlight we'd traded 3 packs of cigarettes for. Behind me, Marco's labored breathing kept rhythm with the scraping of our makeshift tools against the earth. "Past the support beam," I whispered, feeling the wooden plank press into my palm. We'd stolen them piece by piece from the prison workshop, smuggling them back to our cells under loose-fitting jumpsuits. Each theft was a calculated risk, each beam essential to prevent the tunnel from becoming our tomb. The plan had started with an offhand comment from Miguel, a lifer who'd spent 20 years studying the prison's blueprint during his job in the maintenance office. "The old drainage system," he'd said one day in the yard, eyes fixed on a point beyond the walls. "They never properly sealed it when they renovated in '95. It took us 2 months just to break through the concrete floor of cell block D, working only during the night shift when Officer Sullivan was on duty. Sullivan was a heavy sleeper, and the white noise machine he used to stay asleep covered the sound of our digging. We'd timed his patterns perfectly. 45 minutes of deep sleep, followed by a brief walk around the block. Like clockwork, the earth beneath the prison was harder than we'd expected. Each foot forward was a battle against clay and rock, our progress measured in inches rather than yards. We stored the excavated dirt in pillowcases, disposing of it handful by handful in the prison garden during yard time. The guards thought we'd developed a sudden interest in horticulture, if they only knew we were planting our way to freedom. "How much further?" Marco's voice trembled with exhaustion. He'd been with me since the beginning, his experience as a former construction worker proving invaluable. I consulted the crude map we'd drawn on the back of a lunch menu. 20 feet, give or take. The drainage pipe should be just ahead. The beam of our flashlight caught something metallic. My heart jumped. The old drainage pipe, exactly where Miguel said it would be. But as I reached out to touch it, a deep rumble echoed through the tunnel. We froze. "Was that?" Marco didn't finish his question. "Thunder," I assured him, though I wasn't certain. We hadn't heard anything from the outside world in months. The prison's thick walls kept us isolated, and news was sparse. Strange rumors had been circulating among the guards lately, their conversations tense and hushed. I pushed the thoughts aside. Whatever was happening out there didn't matter. Freedom was 20 feet away, and nothing else existed beyond this tunnel, beyond this moment. "One more hour," I said, gripping my tool tighter. "One more hour and we're out." Marco nodded in the darkness, and we resumed our work. The metal pipe groaned as we began to cut through it, each saw stroke bringing us closer to the outside world. Neither of us knew then that our months of meticulous planning, our desperate climb toward freedom, was leading us into something far worse than the cells we were leaving behind. But in that moment, all we could think about was the sweet promise of open sky above us. Just a few more feet. Just a few more cuts through aging metal. Just a few more minutes until freedom. The pipe finally gave way with a dull crack, and for the first time in months, we felt a breath of outside air rush into our tunnel. It carried with it the faint scent of smoke and something else, something wrong. But we were too close now to turn back. Too committed to our path to question what waited for us on the other side. Freedom was calling, and we were about to answer, blind to the horror our hard-won liberty would reveal. The drain pipe opened into a shallow ravine about half a mile from the prison's outer wall. As I pulled myself out into the open air, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Acrid and heavy, like burning plastic mixed with something organic and rotting. Marco emerged behind me, his prison uniform caked with mud and sweat. "We did it," he whispered, but his voice carried none of the triumph we'd imagined during those long months of digging. Something felt wrong. The night was too quiet, too still. The constant background noise of the city had vanished. No traffic, no sirens, no distant voices, only the occasional crack echoing through empty streets. "Where are the searchlights?" Marco asked, looking back at the prison. He was right. The powerful beams that usually swept the perimeter were dark. The prison itself seemed to be running on minimal power, with only a few windows showing any light at all. We had planned to split up after the escape. It's harder to track two separate targets, but something made me hesitate. "Maybe we should stick together, at least until we reach the city." Marco nodded, clearly feeling the same unease. The ravine led toward the industrial district, which should have been alive with third-shift workers at this hour. Instead, we saw only dark buildings and silent smokestacks. As we approached the first row of warehouses, I spotted a car in the parking lot, a newer model SUV with its driver's door open. "We could use that," I said, already moving toward it. But as we got closer, the wrongness of the scene became apparent. The interior was covered in dark stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. The back window was shattered, and deep gouges marked the leather seats, as if something had torn through them with savage desperation. "Something's not right," Marco whispered, taking a step back. "What happened here?" A sudden crash from inside one of the warehouses made us both jump. Marco grabbed a broken piece of pipe from the ground, and I wished I had thought to do the same. The sound of scraping metal grew closer, accompanied by an odd shuffling noise. "We should go," I said, but before we could move, a figure emerged from the warehouse's side door. In the dim light, I could make out a security guard's uniform, but the way the person moved sent waves of dread through me. Each step was a calculated struggle, as if their joints had crystallized and could only move in sharp, decisive breaks, like watching someone try to walk with glass instead of bones. "Hey!" Marco called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need help. Something's wrong at the prison." The guard turned toward us, and terror seized my chest. In the pale moonlight, I could see that half of his face was simply absent. Not wounded, not damaged, but missing, as if something had peeled away layers of reality itself. Yet somehow he was still moving, still coming toward us. And he wasn't alone. More figures emerged from the shadows, workers in blood-stained coveralls, office employees in torn business attire. They moved like broken clockwork, their bodies fighting against natural motion, each step a deliberate violation of how things should be. Their faces wore expressions of vacant hunger, eyes reflecting nothing but an endless consuming emptiness. "Move," I said, grabbing Marco's arm. "Move!" We sprinted past the SUV, its open door a silent witness to whatever horror had played out here. Behind us, the shuffling sounds grew louder, accompanied now by sounds that shouldn't come from human throats, a chorus of hollow, yearning moans that seemed to echo from somewhere far deeper than their ruined bodies. The city proper was just ahead, its skyline a dark silhouette against the night sky. Smoke rose from several buildings, and I could see the orange glow of fires in the distance. As we ran, we passed more signs of catastrophe: overturned cars, smashed storefronts, streets littered with abandoned belongings. A military helicopter lay crashed and burning in the middle of an intersection, its rotors twisted into abstract sculptures of violence. "The phone booth," Marco gasped as we ran. "We need to call someone." But the phone booth we passed was smashed, its handset dangling uselessly. Through its broken glass, I could see a crumpled newspaper. The headline caught my eye as we rushed past: "Quarantine zone expanded, military enforcing." We didn't stop running until we reached a fenced construction site. I helped Marco over the barrier, then scrambled over myself. In the relative safety of a half-finished office building, we finally paused to catch our breath. "Those people," Marco wheezed, doubled over with his hands on his knees. "Those people, they weren't living," I finished for him. They weren't living. The reality of our situation was starting to sink in. We had spent months digging our way out of prison, only to emerge into what looked like the end of the world. From our elevated position, we could see more of the city. Fires burned unchecked in several districts. Cars were piled up at major intersections, creating makeshift barriers. And through the streets, more of those figures moved in groups, like schools of fish in a dark ocean. "The rumors," Marco said suddenly. "Remember? The guards talking about some new disease, about quarantine zones? We thought they were just trying to scare us, but..." I remembered. Over the past few weeks, we'd noticed changes in the prison routine. Fewer guards on duty, no more visitors allowed. The warden looking nervous during his rounds. We'd been so focused on our escape plan that we'd ignored the signs. A scream echoed through the empty streets, pure desperation cut short by silence. In the distance, emergency sirens wailed, then fell quiet. The city groaned around us like a wounded beast. "What do we do now?" Marco asked, his voice small and lost. It was a good question. We were free from our cells, but the city itself had become a prison. And somewhere out there, in the maze of dark streets and abandoned buildings, other survivors must be hiding. Other people who might know what happened, who might have a plan, who might help us survive this nightmare. I looked at the chaos below us, at the world we'd escaped into. "We adapt," I said finally. "We survive." After all, prison had taught us valuable lessons about survival. The only difference now was the size of our cage and the nature of our jailers. In the distance, a figure dragged itself through the street, its body contorted in ways that defied natural movement, each step a stuttering violation of physics. Above it, the moon cast its pale light on a city that had died while we dug our way to freedom. We had escaped our prison only to find ourselves in a much larger, much deadlier one. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder, were we the lucky ones for getting out? Or were the inmates we left behind the fortunate ones, safely locked away as the world fell apart? "My brother has a garage on Westbrook Street," I whispered to Marco as we surveyed the city from our temporary shelter. 3 kilometers east. He always kept some guns in his safe, plus tools we might need. The moon sank behind heavy smoke clouds as we descended from the construction site. The asphalt was covered with a thin layer of ash, our footsteps leaving marks as if we were walking on dirty snow. The silence was broken only by the distant crackle of fires and the occasional metallic sound of something falling somewhere in the city. Buildings cast long shadows in the dim light, their broken windows like hollow eye sockets staring down at us. Every door we passed stood open, telling stories of hasty evacuations or desperate searches for safety. Personal belongings littered the sidewalks, a child's backpack, a briefcase spilling papers, a single shoe with its laces still tied. We turned a corner and stopped abruptly. Before us, occupying the entire length of Main Avenue, lay an abandoned military convoy. 6 heavy vehicles formed an irregular line, like a broken chain across the street. The first truck had crashed into an empty school bus, its windshield a web of cracks stained dark red. The sight of military equipment, meant to represent order and protection, now twisted and abandoned, made the reality of our situation even more stark. "Must have weapons," Marco muttered, cautiously approaching the nearest truck. Each step echoed in the empty street, making us both wince. The cabin door was ajar. In the driver's seat, a soldier still sat, his helmet tilted forward. His hands were frozen on the steering wheel, fingers curled and stiff like dead tree branches. The military radio on his chest emitted only static, a soft, persistent hiss that seemed to mock the silence around us. The cargo compartment was partially open, revealing scattered military supply boxes. Some had been forcibly opened, their contents looted. Others remained intact, protected by robust locks. The interior smelled of gunpowder and something else, the metallic scent of dried blood. "Help me with this," I said, trying to move a heavy box that had slipped into a corner. When we managed to turn it, we found our first stroke of luck. An intact ammunition box, 2 Beretta M9s still in their military holsters, and a military-grade rifle with a suppressor attached. The weight of the weapons provided a small measure of comfort in this new world. Marco examined the weapons with practical knowledge. "Full magazines, but we need to be careful with ammunition. The suppressor will help us move more quietly." He distributed the ammunition between us. each magazine a precious resource in our survival. We continued searching the convoy, piecing together the military's last stand. Deep scratch marks scored the vehicle's sides, paint peeled away by desperate hands. Dark stains on the asphalt formed concentric circles. The soldiers had tried to maintain formation, backing into each other as they were overwhelmed. Empty cartridges scattered in a semicircle marked their final moments. The ground told its own story. Boot prints overlapped and confused, showing where soldiers had rushed to help their companions. Drag marks led away from the vehicles, some accompanied by dark trails that disappeared into doorways or down storm drains. Shell casings carpeted certain areas, indicating where defenders had made their last stands. "Look at this," Marco called, pointing to a clipboard fallen near the last vehicle. The partially legible report mentioned infection spreading through the city and perimeter breach in the southern district. The last note was a hasty scrawl. "Lost contact with Central Command. Omega Protocol in effect. God help us." A sharp metallic sound made us spin around. Less than 50 meters away, a figure emerged from behind an overturned car. A dead soldier dragging one leg behind it, its jaw hanging slack, teeth clicking together with each stumbling step. The torn military uniform revealed bite marks across exposed flesh. Even in death it moved with singular purpose, drawn to the living, driven by hunger. "Don't shoot," I whispered to Marco, who had already raised his weapon. The sound might draw more of them. We backed away slowly, keeping our eyes fixed on the walking corpse. It began moving toward us with the characteristic shuffle of the dead, arms outstretched, fingers splayed. A low moan escaped its throat as it sensed our presence, the sound that had become the city's new heartbeat. The morning air grew thicker as we navigated through the urban maze. We passed a restaurant with tables still set for dinner, napkins and wine glasses undisturbed while chaos reigned outside. Boutique's mannequins stood sentinel behind shattered display windows, their plastic faces reflecting the growing dawn light. Every few blocks we encountered more of the dead. They wandered aimlessly until catching our scent, then turned with terrible synchronicity, drawn to the presence of life. We learned to move between cars, to time our advances with the wind that carried away our scent, to freeze in place when necessary. The city revealed its transformation in layers. Main streets were choked with abandoned vehicles, many still containing personal belongings, phones that had long since died, family photos on dashboards, hastily packed suitcases. Side streets told stories of desperate escapes, dropped keys, scattered groceries, fallen bicycles. We passed an elementary school with cheerful drawings on the windows and dark stains on the walls. A looted supermarket exhaled a sweet smell of decay through its broken doors. A police car had been crushed against a wall, its light still silently flashing, the battery refusing to die. A lonely lighthouse in a sea of destruction. The early morning light cast long shadows as we approached my brother's garage. Roberto's auto repair. The metal gate was closed, but I knew a back entrance. As we drew closer, I noticed details that made me pause. Tools dragged across the ground, dark drops forming a path to the entrance, deep gouges in the back door. "Roberto's smart," I told Marco, trying to convince myself more than him. He must have barricaded himself inside when everything started. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them. But as I stared at the silent garage, a new worry began to grow. What if my brother was in there, but he wasn't my brother anymore? What if, in seeking refuge, we'd only found another kind of prison? The tools scattered around the entrance could have been used as weapons, a desperate last defense against the advancing dead. The morning light began to reveal a city I no longer recognized. Somewhere, an alarm continued to ring, its monotonous sound echoing through the empty streets like an endless lament. Above us, a flock of birds circled aimlessly, having lost their usual perches to smoke and flame. Nature itself seemed confused by what humanity had become. We stood before the garage's back door, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Whatever waited inside, salvation or nightmare, would determine our next move in this dead city. The back door's lock yielded silently to my key. Years of Roberto's obsessive maintenance meant no betraying creak as we eased it open. The garage's interior was a maze of shadows, pale morning light filtering through the dusty windows near the ceiling. Marco raised the suppressed rifle while I held one of the Berettas, the familiar smell of motor oil and grease mixed with a newer, darker scent. Our feet stuck slightly to the floor with each step, dried blood forming a dark trail that led deeper into the building. The first zombie emerged from behind a lifted Toyota, its mechanic's uniform torn and stained. The suppressed rifle made a dull thud, and the corpse dropped. Two more appeared from the darkness, drawn by our movement. Another pair of muffled shots, two more bodies on the ground. We moved through the workspace methodically. A half-repaired motorcycle lay on its side, tools scattered around it like fallen soldiers. The customer waiting area was a scene of violence. Chairs overturned, magazines soaked in dark fluid, a coffee machine still gurgling with its last drops of water. A shuffling sound from the break room drew our attention. 3 more of the dead blocked our path, their work uniforms identifying them as garage employees I once knew. Their faces were now masks of decay, jaws hanging slack as they reached for us. The rifle spoke 3 more times, the sound barely louder than the dropping of the bodies. "The office," I whispered to Marco. "Up those stairs." Blood marked each step of the metal staircase leading to Roberto's office. The door was closed, reinforced with a crude barricade of tool cabinets and shelving units. From inside we heard movement. "Roberto?" I called softly, pressing my ear to the door. "It's me. I'm out. I'm here." A weak voice responded, barely audible. "Michael, you made it out. We're coming in. Are you alone?" Yes, but brother, I'm not..." His voice broke. "I'm not okay." Together, Marco and I cleared the barricade. The office door opened to reveal a scene of last resort survival. Empty food cans and water bottles lined the walls. The windows were covered with sheet metal. Maps and notes were pinned everywhere, tracking the spread of whatever this was. And there, behind his desk, sat Roberto. He looked smaller than I remembered, pale and sweating despite the morning chill. His left arm was wrapped in shop rags, dark fluid seeping through the makeshift bandage. A revolver lay on the desk beside him. "Tried to help them," he said, his voice hoarse. "Joey, the new apprentice, got bit. We didn't know then what it meant. When he turned, it all happened so fast." He gestured weakly at his arm. "Got me during the chaos. I managed to end it. Barricaded myself up here. Been almost 2 days." I moved closer, Marco keeping watch at the door. The wound was bad, the flesh around the bite turning colors that flesh should never be. Roberto's eyes were glassy with fever, his breathing shallow. "The radio," he continued, pointing to a military-style communications unit on his desk. "Been listening? It's everywhere, brother. The whole city, maybe more. Military lost control this morning. They're bombing some areas, trying to contain it." He coughed, a wet sound that shook his whole body. "The fever, it burns, like fire in my veins." "There must be help somewhere," I said, but the words felt hollow. "A hospital, a military base?" Roberto shook his head slowly. "No hospitals left, no help coming." His eyes focused on mine with sudden clarity. "You need to go. Take my truck. Keys in the bottom drawer. Got it ready, just in case. Extra fuel, supplies, some weapons. Head north, there's talk of safe zones in the mountains. We can't just..." "Yes, you can. You have to." He picked up the revolver with trembling hands. I won't become one of them. Won't make you..." His voice cracked. "Won't make you do it." The morning light was stronger now, streaming through gaps in the sheet metal, painting stripes across my brother's pale face. Outside, the city continued its descent into chaos, but in this moment time seemed to stop. "Roberto, I just got out. I just found you. And I'm glad. Glad I got to see you free." He managed a weak smile. "Been keeping track, you know. Marking days until your release. Guess you beat the system." The smile faded. "But you need to go. Now, please." Marco's hand touched my shoulder. "More of them coming. Streets are filling up." Roberto's eyes met mine one last time. In them, I saw the brother who had taught me to fix engines, who had visited me every month for 6 years, who had never given up on me. "Go," he whispered. "Live." We backed out of the office. The last thing I saw was Roberto straightening himself in his chair, revolver steady in his hand, facing the window where the morning sun streamed in. The door closed between us. Marco and I descended the stairs in silence. The sound that came from the office was barely audible through the door, no louder than a hammer falling on an empty chamber. The keys were where he said, along with a packed bag and weapons. The truck started on the first try. Roberto had indeed kept it ready. As we pulled out of the garage's back entrance, I couldn't look back at the building that had been both my brother's livelihood and his final refuge. The city stretched before us, a graveyard of civilization waiting to be traversed. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks obscured by smoke and haze. Somewhere up there, if Roberto's information was right, safety waited. But as we drove through streets increasingly crowded with the dead, I realized that safety was just another kind of prison. The world had changed, and freedom, true freedom, might not exist anymore. Not in this new reality where every breath was a gift and every heartbeat a defiance of the encroaching darkness. The military radio crackled with static as we approached the mountain highway. Fragments of transmissions cut through the white noise. Perimeter breached. City center lost. Orbital strike authorized. "The tunnel's our only shot," Marco said, pointing to the entrance of the mountain pass tunnel ahead. The massive concrete arch disappeared into the mountainside, its emergency lights casting an intermittent red glow into the morning haze. A stream of abandoned vehicles stretched from its mouth, their doors hanging open, belongings scattered across the asphalt like fallen leaves. I slowed the truck as we approached. The entrance was tight, but passable. Dozens of cars had tried to escape through here, creating a meandering path of metal and glass. The tunnel would take us straight through the mountain, bypassing the gridlocked highway above. If Roberto's information about the safe zones was right, we'd emerge on the other side just 20 miles from help. Something moved in the shadows between the cars, then another and another. "We don't have a choice," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. "The artillery strikes are getting closer." Marco checked the suppressed rifle. "Half a magazine left, 2 full ones for the Berettas." He paused, looking at the darkness ahead. It's a long tunnel. The truck's headlights illuminated only the first 100 feet of the tunnel as we entered. Red emergency lights pulsed every 50 yards, creating pools of crimson that made the shadows dance. The air grew thick with the smell of exhaust and decay. The first wave of them emerged from behind a jackknifed bus. Dozens of bodies, moving as one mass drawn by our engine's sound and the truck's lights. Their moans echoed off the tunnel walls, multiplying into a chorus that filled the enclosed space. I pressed the accelerator, aiming for gaps between the abandoned vehicles. The truck's steel bumper caught the first zombie, sending it spinning into others. More of them appeared in our lights, hands reaching, mouths open in eternal hunger. "Right side!" Marco shouted, firing the rifle through his open window. The suppressed shots were lost in the engine's roar and the growing chorus of the dead. Each bullet found its mark, but for every one that fell, 3 more emerged from the darkness. A minivan blocked half the lane ahead. I wrenched the wheel left, scraping against a sedan. Sparks flew as metal ground against metal. The truck shuddered but kept moving. The tunnel's ventilation system was dead, making the air progressively thicker. Sweat ran down my face as I navigated the obstacle course of abandoned vehicles and grasping hands. The headlights reflected off the wet tunnel walls, creating disorienting patterns of light and shadow. A body landed on the hood, its face pressing against the windshield. Dead eyes stared through the glass as decaying fingers searched for purchase. I swerved, trying to shake it off, but it held on with unnatural strength. Marco leaned out his window, trying to get a clear shot, when another hand grabbed his arm. The rifle clattered to the truck bed as he struggled with his attacker. I couldn't help him. Losing focus for even a second would mean crashing in this maze of metal and death. He managed to draw his Beretta, firing point blank into the zombie's face. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The dead thing fell away, but the gunshot's echo had drawn more attention. Much more. Ahead, illuminated by the emergency lights, a solid wall of bodies blocked the tunnel. Dozens, maybe hundreds of the dead, packed between the abandoned cars. There was no way through. The maintenance access, Marco pointed to a small doorway in the tunnel wall. We can make it on foot. I started to slow down, but he grabbed my arm. Don't stop, not even for a second. He checked his pistol magazine. I'll clear the way. When I opened my door, turn the wheel hard right. Use the truck. Marco. I was going to die in that prison anyway. He managed a grim smile. At least this means something. Before I could stop him, he threw his door open. The truck's side mirror snapped off against an abandoned car as he fired into the horde, drawing their attention. Now! I cranked the wheel right. The truck plowed into the mass of bodies, creating a temporary gap. Marco rolled out, coming up shooting. His bullets caught the nearest zombies in the head, each shot precise despite the chaos. The horde turned toward the new prey, drawn by noise and movement. Go! He shouted, backing toward the maintenance door. I'll keep them busy. The truck's tires found purchase on the blood-slick concrete. I gunned the engine, pushing through the gap Marco had created. In the rearview mirror, I saw him reach the maintenance door, still firing, the dead closing in around him. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, emergency lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. More of them appeared in the headlights, but fewer now. I pushed the truck faster, even as the engine protested the abuse. The radio burst to life. Strike authorized. All units clear mountain sector. Repeat. Orbital strike. The first explosion rocked the tunnel behind me. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling as more detonations followed. The mountain itself seemed to shudder with each impact. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading like lightning through the concrete. Warning lights flashed as sections of the tunnel began to collapse. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, swerving between falling chunks of ceiling. The truck's frame groaned under the strain. A massive blast shook the mountain. The tunnel's lights died all at once, leaving only my headlights in the darkness. In the rearview mirror, a wall of debris and dust rushed forward like an angry tide. The ceiling came down behind me, a cascade of concrete and steel that sealed the tunnel like a tomb. The truck's back end lifted as the shockwave hit, sending me spinning. Metal screamed against concrete. The world turned upside down. When consciousness returned, the truck lay on its side, the headlights still burning dimly. Silence had replaced the chaos. A deep, absolute silence that only exists underground. Emergency lights sputtered weakly through the dust-filled air. The tunnel behind me had collapsed completely. Ahead, in the dim red glow, shapes moved in the darkness. The dead still walked, trapped here with me in this concrete grave. Their moans echoed off the walls, a sound that would continue until the emergency lights finally died, or until they found me. I checked the Beretta, 3 rounds left. The rifle was gone, lost in the crash. Somewhere ahead, if the tunnel hadn't collapsed completely, daylight waited. Somewhere ahead. If Roberto's information was right, safety existed. But as I sat in the wreck of the truck, listening to the shuffling sounds draw closer, I realized that this twisted path to freedom had led me to just another kind of cell. The only difference was the size of the cage and the nature of my jailers.